Welcome back to Bottom Deck Achievements, a Hearthstone achievement hunting series. Well, we have a release date for United in Stormwind, the next Hearthstone set, which is coming out August 3rd, which means we have less than a month to go in the Barons meta, and I've been really busy cracking some of these achievements, so to get all of these done, let's hop right into that. No, your eyes don't deceive you. Since my last video, I've cracked 13 of these achievements, so let's start claiming these points. I'm going to try to go pretty quick on these, just kind of give a quick rundown, but the Taint Heart Tormentor one proved to be pretty rough, but I eventually got it done. Most of this got done with a single token Druid, which runs mostly spells, that just had no answer for this. And, well, still working on these sigils. This achievement I'm actually going to talk about a little bit in the bulk of this video, so I'll save it for that. But I've been working on a little bit of the Druid stuff. I still don't know what I'm going to do about these two, but we'll get there. We got a little more time. Freezing characters with elementals I will also talk about a little later. If you haven't realized by the video title, we're going to be talking about duels today. I have a couple builds that I want to share, and this achievement is one of the main ones that gets covered in pretty much every build. You'll see. Moving on, Paladin, I finally finished the Invigorating Sermon achievement that I covered a long time ago. I finally took that out of my hand buff deck in Wild. Still a decent card, though I don't really want to run it, what with needing to draw minions of certain attacks or health totals in that deck. But that achievement's done. That's a whopping 500 experience points plus the experience bonus from the rewards track. Also, speaking of terrible achievements, I finally finished this one, the Full Hands with Priest achievement, which sucked. I think this might be the worst achievement in the set because it's counterintuitive to how you want to play. I understand that you want to hold on to a lot of spells as Priest and everything, but this one's ridiculous. This one sucked. And we're almost fully done with the Warlock ones. 3 to claim here. I finished summoning all the imps. I finally cast 80 zero-cost shadow spells, and we're almost there on that. Wow, I only have 1 to go on that. Okay, that's kind of cool. I had a decent duels run that I'll cover my list later, but dang, I didn't realize I was that close. It's kind of hard to check the progress when you're just waiting to click on these. Cool, Warlock is almost done, which is great. Attacked sometimes with Crash. Okay, I have a lot more to go on that. This is a bit of a slow one. I'll talk about this one too. And finally, in the neutrals, I finally figured out which one of the 12 herbs I did not use with Kazakus. I think it was the spell damage one, which is like one of the worst options. But we got there, finally. Mutanus continues to be one of my favorite... Oh, hey, am I done with this one? Oh yeah, I am. Cool. Mutanus is really fun. I love this guy. He's a good boy. And then finally, we're about halfway done with a rank 3 spells one. There's a lot to go. Let us scroll. Now that we finally clicked on all these, let's scroll up to see what our percent completion is. I should just stop. What's the point of getting any more? No, obviously we're gonna go more, but this is a pretty nice total where we're at right now. I didn't even plan that out. That's just a really happy coincidence. You'll love to see it. Okay, on to the main topic of today's video. We're going to be talking about Duels, a mode I've spent a lot of time in over the last couple weeks, and a mode that I've come to realize is pretty incredible for farming for some of these otherwise terrible achievements. You don't tank your MMR in Standard or Wild, and the meta is such that some of these you can pretty much build your whole deck around doing. You might not win all the time, or most of the time with some of these builds, but it's really good for just these otherwise garbage achievements. Like I mentioned the Priest one earlier, potentially being the worst offender of this whole set. And there's a deck I built that pretty much gets that done as quickly as it can. And granted, you don't get a bunch of turns every game, you get a couple here or there, but it adds up over time. And in this video, I want to talk about 5 lists, well, 4 new ones. One of them is pretty much just an updated version of the Shaman list I covered a couple weeks ago, which, if you haven't seen that video, check it out. It's pretty good. I like it. I'm proud of it. But I want to talk about 5 different classes that you can work on many achievements with. We're going to be talking about Druid, Shaman, Warrior, Warlock, and Priest. So first up is Shaman, and I don't want to spend too much time talking about Shaman because, like I said, I covered them in a video already. But here's the updated list I've been running, and I want to take some time to talk about a couple ground rules that I set for pretty much every list. I mentioned that I would talk about the freezing minions with elementals achievement as mage, which I've found the best way to grind for that because in standard, boards get pretty wide, and you don't really want to cast an 8-mana spell to freeze a single guy just to summon 2 water elementals, and nobody's really playing with the Oasis Allies secret. It's not the best, so a lot of water elementals and a lot of the like 1/1 shards that freeze, those are really not seeing a lot of play. But you know, it is a good, cheap, easy way to freeze something with an elemental is a Glacial Shard. So I've pretty much been running that in every Duels deck that I create. It's a neutral, so it fits anywhere, and it's cheap. It only costs 1 mana. It's incredible. It's a battle cry, so it's not even like it can get removed and you just don't get any progress for it. Glacial Shard is a really good way to tick up the freeze enemies with elementals. It doesn't have to be as a mage, it can be with any class, and I found that Glacial Shard is pretty good for that. Also, I've been putting Mutanus in pretty much any deck. A lot of Duels decks will eventually draft big minions, and I found that more often than not, you can almost pretty reliably get 4/4s or bigger with Mutanus. I ate a Deathwing the other day in Duels, which is pretty incredible. And I've already popped the 2nd rank of that achievement as well, so Glacial Shard and Mutanus are neutral options that pretty much go in every Duels deck I make. I might start including Mutanus a little less now that I have that 2nd achievement, but in some of the slower build decks, I still think Mutanus is a really good choice. So anyway, this Shaman list is pretty much the same list I built last time, just with a couple things taken out. Like I think I took out Lightning Storm and some other things. I'm trying to look at it right now. But I added in the Perpetual Flame spell, which goes along with one of the new achievements, which is just destroying a bunch of minions with that spell. Especially if you have the perk, the hero power that you can't be overloaded. Especially with some spell damage tacked onto that. Perpetual Flame is pretty nasty and can clear boards super easy. So I found that one isn't too difficult. I've trying to focus on other classes that aren't Shaman in preparation for this, because I've already focused on Shaman a good bit. But here's my updated list. You can see it up here, and yeah, let's move on now. I know I just talked about Warlock last week with Stealer of Souls, and I know Zoo is terrible, and Control is pretty bad as well. And Control's probably going to get a little worse because its best matchup, Control Priest, is getting nerfed pretty soon. So I won't spend too much time talking about this list, but it does have a lot of the discard synergy built into it, which the hero power that you discard a card and then draw a card is pretty much cheap guaranteed draw if you can get a Stealer of Souls out. It runs a couple larger boys. The 7-cost demon that buffs your other demons is a good hit to cast for health, as well as the treasure, which is the Calamos, which gets stronger the more cards you discard. You can get pretty lucky and find a bunch of other discard synergies in your draft pools, but in my run that I did of this, I did not get super lucky. But I did manage to win a couple games, and it wasn't absolutely terrible. As we saw in the beginning, I'm only 1 health spent away from cracking this achievement, so this should be done the next time for the next video. As always, Glacial Shard and Mutanus are there. There's some Soul Fragment stuff, but mostly it's just a standard list. You can put in the rank spell as well if you want, but with this deck not being super good, a lot of your games won't go to turn 10. So I don't super think that Duels is great for casting the rank 3 spells. But of any deck, I think this one could do it the best, or one of the best. Also, if you haven't gotten the Summoning Imps achievement, that's a no-brainer to throw in. And also this contains Raise Dead, which is a zero cost Shadow Warlock spell, which you also need for that other achievement. Probably not going to be playing too much more Warlock in Duels, but I just figured I'd throw this list in because it's yet another option for Stealer of Souls. I did have one game that was really, really juicy where I managed to pull free admission with my Stealer, and then I pulled the Siege Breaker off of that. So that was a nice, like, huge chunk of health I got to spend on Warlock cards. So that was pretty good. Just figured I'd throw this in so it can be like an even 5 of the 10 classes that I have decks to show off for. Okay, moving on to Druid, which is a bit unusual why I built the deck this way. On paper, the main achievement I'm chasing here seems like it would be pretty easy, and that's casting 5 nature spells in a single turn, like 25 times I think it is. And you might think, well, Druids are doing this stuff all the time, they're casting a ton of spells in a turn. This is easy, what gives? Why build a deck just for this achievement? Well, I've played a decent amount of Token Druid, and a lot of the most important spells in that deck aren't nature-based, or they're too expensive to cast too many in a turn. Like, I think Arbor Up and Power of the Wild are not nature spells. The Eclipse cards are arcane, not nature. And generally, in my experience, you don't super want to dump, like, your whole hand in one turn, and you're typically not casting 5 spells in a turn. So I figured Duels was a good way to go here. It's pretty much just loaded with a bunch of cheap nature spells, as well as Glacial Shard and Mutanus. But another achievement that we are going for here is the casting specifically Druid beasts for less cost than they normally cost. Now, there's a couple cards in Druid that do this for you, but they all kind of suck, and Druid beasts themselves aren't super the best. Yes, there's the Kodo that gives you armor, which is pretty good in Duels, actually, and a couple ones here and there. But overall, like, the playing beasts for cheaper hasn't really worked out in Constructed. But what I've found, since you're running a bunch of these cheap spells that you're trying to vomit out all in one turn, is that Umbral Owl works really well as well in here, because that one gets cheaper the more spells you play, so just naturally over the course of working on this, that'll be cheaper as well. So if you can discount it to 0, that's 7 points towards that achievement. And I don't remember what the final one is. I think it might be 100 mana less, which is a lot of casts of Umbral Owl, but if you can find it each game, and it is, I think, the only beast in this deck, Living Seed tutors for it, and with your deck as small as it is, you tend to find it pretty quickly. I usually pop off with the 5 nature spells in a turn around turn 5 or turn 6. Typically, you just need at least something on the board. If you don't have Thorngrowth Sentries, I've cast the buff spells on my opponent's minions before, just because, well, frankly, this is a deck that you're not winning with. You're really just using this deck to grind for the nature spells and the cheat beasts achievements. And it works pretty well for that. I've also managed to just squeak out a win here and there by building a big guy, by playing a cheap Umbral Owl and buffing it with the Mark of the Wild and Mark of the Spike Shell and stuff like that. So it's a terrible deck, but in my experience, it's been pretty efficient at getting this stuff done. Now, it is going to take a lot of runs to pop all these achievements, but well, in my opinion, it's probably better than doing all this in Constructed. So here you go. Moving on now to the dreaded Priest and the dreaded, oh my god, there's so many cards in my hand, I'm burning my cards on purpose and spending my turn not playing any cards deck list. With the exception of Glacial Shard and Mutanus, if you look through the list, you'll notice that all the cards generate at least one other card, pretty much. Raise Dead adds up to 2 minions to your hand. Thoughtsteal adds 2 cards to your hand. Everything else at least cycles or adds something to your hand. Soothsayer's Caravan is a bit iffy. It doesn't always live, but if you can get it out early, it's good, especially if you can keep it out for 2 turns. It's a super baller thing. Archdruid Neralex gives you 2 cards over the course of 2 turns, and everything else either draws a card or generates one. If you start second on the coin, you tend to be able to do this if you draw well enough by like turn 4. I choose the the Void Fiend hero power. You might think that the one that heals you and draws a card if you're still damaged is the way to go, but I found as I've played around with that, you tend to just die faster. at least with the Void Fiend one, you create targets that people are incentivized to trade into because in their minds, oh my god, if I let this live, it's going to drain health from me every turn. So people tend to trade with those, especially because they have 0 attack. Um, Also, they're just good targets for Raise Dead if you're not playing out any other minions. You can just get 2 of these in your hand and hang on to them. I've had games that got up to like 3 or 4 turns of just burning cards. You'll get there eventually if you just keep trying at it. Where you could get lucky, as I did, as I was filming footage for this and run into an opponent that's just not playing and just doing nothing every turn, giving you an infinite amount of time to just burn cards. Well, as however many as there are in your deck, that is. This is as good of a list as you're going to get for this terrible, terrible achievement. If you don't have the Caravan achievement yet, you can get that with this. If you want to go more control, the rank spell could get you there if you make it to turn 10, but once again, this is another deck list that you're not planning on winning with. You're just planning on grinding out the one achievement that you can, and the turn that you know you're going to lose, if you happen to be at turn 7 and have Mutanus in your hand, just drop that, play it, play out your Glacial Shard, play out whatever you can, because, hey, you're not going to make it another turn anyway. But this is the list I pretty much built every time. I ran a bunch of runs as Priest, and it was not fun. This, like I said, might be the worst achievement in the whole set, aside from maybe the Party Up one, which is just an RNG nightmare, but we'll hopefully talk about that another day. But this is my Priest list. Use it if you're farming for these achievements. And finally, last but certainly not least, we have the Control Warrior list. Now, this list is actually good, and you're probably actually going to win some games with this one. I went on a tear and got an 8-win run with this exact starting list the other day. It's just slow and greedy, and it's fun, actually. I'm running the power that deals 1 damage to a minion, and either gives it attack if it doesn't die, or gives you armor if it does die. It's great for picking off small threats of your opponent. It's really good for activating the Frenzy on Kresh and the power of auto armaments. This list is about as greedy as it goes. Oh, and it can also proc Grom's Enrage, which I guess is not called Enrage anymore. But yeah, this is actually a decent list. It's really greedy. It runs like War Cache and Information to just add stuff to your hand. It's a bit slow, and it's built like that, but I like this list a lot. Unfortunately, sometimes you just like steamroll your opponent before you find Kresh, but the games where you do find Kresh, the armor gain of 8 is quite substantial, especially in the early games when you're starting and health is like 20. Adding 8 armor to that is pretty sick. There's just a lot of good stuff in this deck. Kresh is good for both the attacking with Kresh's shield achievement, and as well as the playing Frenzy minions one, which I still don't have, actually. I have not procced Frenzy 100 times yet, which is, you know, I'll get there eventually, but that's kind of unfortunate. But yeah, unfortunately, the Kresh one seems like it's going to take a real long time, but this list is so good that it just doesn't matter. I want to say that my average wins with this deck is probably around 3 or 4, which, you know, if you've spent money on a ticket, getting 3 wins pretty much lets you break even. I think this list is real good. Of course, it runs Mutanus and Glacial Shard as well. Troublemaker is really, really good. Stonemaul Anchorman is there for another Frenzy guy, and I think I've pretty much talked about everything. Athletic Studies is just good value. Minefield, don't sleep on Minefield. Minefield is incredible in the early game against a lot of decks in duels. It's real solid. I have had games where I've drawn too many cards and had such a full hand that Outrider's Axe actually burned cards because I was just drawing too much. That's how greedy this deck is. Coerce is just really good removal, as well as Brawl being like one of the kings of board clears. It's a real good list. Yeah, getting 8 wins for someone who really doesn't know much about duels at all, aside from just messing around for achievements, it felt pretty good. So this is the list of all the ones that I've said today. This one has the biggest stamp of approval for me. Go out there and play some turtles. Well, that's going to do it for me today. Sorry about the weird format of this video, but I just kind of had it in my head all week that since I've been spending so much time in duels, I just wanted to cover a bunch of decks. Um, and in hindsight, it's something I probably should have done a lot earlier in this expansion cycle. So look for something similar to this maybe pretty early on in the United in Stormwind meta. But yeah, just a couple weeks to go. I'm going to try to stream a little more Hearthstone over the next couple weeks, trying to really hammer down some of these more difficult achievements that I still have to go. I think doing it live on stream might be pretty fun, and so be looking for maybe the last couple ones of this set to be stream highlights from those. But yeah, as always, feel free to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed this video. If there's any achievements that I still somehow haven't covered and you'd like to see covered, please feel free to leave those in a comment below. And hey, if you're playing Duels too and have a good list for some of these, drop that too. I'd appreciate that to have more stuff to play. And as always, please follow me on Twitter and Twitch. I'm at HeyTallman at both places. And yeah, that is going to do it for me. So as always, thank you for watching, have a great day, and may the card you need the most never be at the bottom of your deck. I can't believe I was at 69% exactly.